If you would turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, if you're not already there. And one of the things that we notice that Paul says about Thessalonica is the fact that it was a very remarkable church. And it's remarkable because it showed the characteristics of Christ in its dealings with people. I have a story to tell you that happened several years ago, and so what I want to do is you remember this story, and then we're going to refer back to it here a couple of times. But it was several years ago that we would take junior high young people down to Central Christian College of the Bible in Moulton, Missouri for what was called Crazy Days. Okay? Jennifer will tell you about this, won't you, Jennifer? Okay? Because she was involved in this situation. Some of you know you've been too long when you look at the parents and say, you were a junior higher. Okay? But anyway, we went down there and we came back, and we were on 36 just west of Hannibal, Missouri. And this lady, Mrs. Marks, I still remember her name. Do you remember what year that was, Jennifer? 90s? I don't know, it's been a while ago. So, but anyway, this lady, there was a person to make a left-hand turn off 36, and this Mrs. Marks came up behind him and couldn't stop. So she veered to the right, and when she came back, she overcorrected, and she hit us head on. And I remember Jennifer because when I looked to see the person in the seat next to me, Jenny was up there. Okay? So they hit us head on, and fortunately, there's a lot of different tangents on this, but we ended up, she flattened our front tires when she hit us, and which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because we stopped about this far from a 6-foot ditch that we would have, but it slowed us down because the tires were flat. So anyway, they hit right there on the corner on the driver's side, and when we got done, there were some people that stopped, and this guy came up to me, and he said, "Are you okay?" Well, they crushed the footwell, and I wasn't really stuck, but I was having a hard time getting my feet out. So I said to this gentleman, "Well, I'm kind of stuck here." And the next thing I knew, folks, we had, I don't know, 10 ambulances, 8 fire trucks, 10 or 12 police cars, all sitting there. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind as we go on here. There's a couple other references that we're going to make here. Well, in this second chapter of 1 Thessalonians, Paul's going to share with us some of the characteristics that he looks at in the church of Thessalonica that we ought to imitate because they are so precious in God's sight. If we would, beginning in verse 1 of 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, "You know, brothers, that our visit to you was not a failure. We had previously suffered and been insulted in Philippi, as you know, but with the help of our God, we dare to tell you his gospel in spite of strong opposition. For the appeal we make does not spring from error to impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we speak as men approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please men, but God who tests our hearts. You know we never use flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We are not looking for praise from men, not from you or anyone else. As apostles of Christ, we could have been a burden to you, but we were gentle among you, like a mother caring for her little children. We love you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you have become so dear to us. Surely remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We work night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. You are our witnesses. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory." As I look, there's 3 things that I want to share with you that we should, as Christians, be willing to do. The first one is bearing. To be bearing with one another, to support one another. We need to try as we can to make the load of life as light as possible for those that are around us. To put forth the effort and strength for our brothers and sisters in Christ. If you look in Galatians chapter 6, 1 and 2, here is what the Apostle Paul writes there, as soon as I find it. "Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, You who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. And especially verse 2, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. To use my abilities and my talents to help wherever it is needed. You know, several years ago, there was a young person that lived here in Watsika one time and moved up to Chicago. And one night, I don't know, it must be midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and it was this young person. And they began to talk to me about how their life really was falling apart, and they were having all kinds of struggles, and they called because they were starting to think about taking their own life. Well, after we talked for quite some time, I said to them, I know a preacher up in that area. I got your phone number. Is it okay if I call him right now that he can come over and talk to you? And they answered yes. Okay? So they hung up the phone. I called this preacher, told him what the situation was, gave him the phone number to call, and if he could go by there and just talk with them to get them settled down. About 3 or 4 days later, this young person called me again, and I asked, did this church help you? And they said, Joe, 3 days later, I got a form letter from this church with a questionnaire I was supposed to fill out. Wow. I put the phone up and called the preacher and explained to him how disappointed I was that this person was at a crucial time in their life. They needed some kind of support, and you sent them a form letter and had a questionnaire for them to fill out. How many times are we guilty of the same? Oh man, we don't send them a form letter, but we ignore it. We pretend that it's not there because we're busy, aren't we? We've got a lot of things to do. We've got a lot of things that we need to accomplish. And here is someone that is in great need, and we don't know exactly what the situation is, but we just kind of walk the other way. So we're not responsible. If we don't know, then we're not responsible, and we remove ourselves from that. To use those abilities, there was one night on a TV show, this guy was on a TV show, and he's supposed to be the most muscular man in the world. Okay? Don't know if that's true or not, but he's on this TV show, and I thought it was very, very good because he was standing there showing his muscles, and David Letterman was the one that was interviewing him, and they asked if there was any questions from the audience. This lady stood up, and you know what she asked him? What do you use those muscles for? I thought that was an excellent question. And the answer is nothing. I just stand out here and flex my muscles. We all have spiritual gifts. And we can talk about how mature we are in our faith and how grown up we are in our faith, but what do you use it for? Just to show off and say, look at me? Or am I going to use my abilities to help those people, to share their concerns and problems? When we come here on Sunday, do we come to give or to receive? And the answer is, I hope both. I hope both. That we can gain strength, and when we encourage other people, it encourages us, does it not? So what happens many times, and I've shared this with you many, many times before, we come to church, I sit down next to Adam, I say, Adam, how are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm doing fine. How are you, Joe? Oh, I'm fine. And the reality is that both our weeks have been horrible. So we sit in church for an hour, whatever, depends on how long I preach, right? Okay. And we get up and we leave. Not helped at all. We wouldn't allow someone to become a part of that, or we didn't want to become a part of that. We want people to say, oh, I'm fine, and go on. See, I have the option and the privilege at times to sit down and talk with people, and I'll say, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. But after you talk to them about 10 or 15 minutes, it's not. It's not. And I would suppose that would fit, if not all of us, most of us, right? There are some things in life that just aren't going very well. Not at all. There are areas of our life that we really struggle with. But when I sit down, in church, and ask Adam how he's doing, your answer is, oh, fine. What do we use those muscles for? Of course, you know that God will never give you more than you can bear, right? Would you please tell me where it says that in the Bible? Anybody? It doesn't. It doesn't. I encounter people all the time that have more than they can bear. I talk with people all the time that can't make this on their own. That's what we're for, folks. I don't care how doctrinally right we are. If we're not reaching out to other people, then what are we good for? We're right and they're wrong, and we're just going to stay over here. There are times, I know that we live in a very dirty society. I know there's a lot of evil and wickedness, but folks, sometimes we've got to meet there. We've got to be there to help these people. We've got to take the time to listen to what's going on and try to understand what's happening with these people. To use our gifts and our abilities to inspire other people, to help them, to listen to what they say. You know, listening is a gift that's being lost. We're so caught up in what we're going to say, we don't hear what the other person is saying. We're to bear with them, to take the load with them. Albert Schweitzer, I don't think I had a slide for that one. He's down in Africa as a medical missionary. And it's like 100 degrees out with all kinds of humidity and all kinds of troubles and problems that they're going through. And he's talking with this young man. He has an interview with him. And in the middle of it, he walks away. And here's this lady that's got this pile of wood that she's trying to carry up to her hut. And he walks over there. He picks it up and carries it all the way to her hut for her. And then comes back. And he looks at the young man and said, no one should carry a burden like that by themselves. There is much in our lives, is there not, that we just can't make it on our own. I don't care what it is. And that's a selfish attitude that has come up in our society. Most of us, if not all of us, can't make it on our own. We never could make it on our own. And we are to share with one another, to bring honor to God when we live like we say we believe. That brings honor to Him. You know, between the great things we can't do and the little things we won't do, there's that danger that we're not going to do anything. What's great? What is insignificant to God? Jesus said if you give someone a glass of water, you won't lose your reward. The smallest thing could help. The smallest thing could be there to help those around us. Booker T. Washington was a slave, and him and his brother were at this plantation, and the clothes that they had to wear were made of flax. It was very rough, like sandpaper type. And Booker T. Washington had very sensitive skin. So whenever they got new clothes, his brother would wear his until it got broke in. So he didn't have to fight with the problems of that material. To help one another. That is what he's looking for us to do. The way of life must show the reality of our faith. We need to put feet to our faith. We need to put effort to our faith. Not that we believe only, but that we're going to act upon that faith to help those people around us. Our ministry is to grow in compassion, to have a better understanding of what's going on with the people around us. Let them know that they're not alone. You know, that's the worst disease anyone can suffer from, is being alone. And we are to make sure people know that they're not alone in what they're going through. The reason that I spent so much time in Ohio with Rich is that reason. So he didn't ever think that he was alone in what he was going through. And I pray that we do pray for Mark and Robin and Carla and Kathy, though they know they're not alone. Because one of the things when you go through those things is this feeling of being alone. Not just the person suffering, but the family that's with them. You feel like you're here isolated and you're struggling with all this. We need to let them know that they're not alone. All people, not just those that we love, those that we're close to, excuse me, but all people. There was a true story of this young man who had served in Vietnam. And he had come home, he had returned home at about Christmas time, and he called his parents. And he said to his parents that he was home, he was in the States, and Mom and Dad were very social people. They were socialites, and they had all these parties to go to. And Mom said, it's great, you're home. You could go with us to these parties. And he said, well, Mom, I've got something to ask you. And she said, what's that? He said, I have a friend that came back with me from Vietnam. And he was injured in battle, Mom. And he's lost one leg. He lost an arm, and his face is disfigured too. Well, she hesitated, and she said, that's okay. He could come home to stay with you for a few days. And he said, no, Mom, I'm asking if he could come home and live with us. Would it be okay? And she said, oh, well, I don't know, with the lifestyle that we've got and as active we are, and someone that is injured like that, I don't know whether they could come and live with us or not. I really don't think so. Well, she said, I'm sorry, I got to rush. There's a party we're going to be late for. Call us when you know you're going to be home. And they hung the phone up. That night, when they got back, there was a call from the California police. And they said, we hate to tell you this way, but we found a young man in a motel room. His face was disfigured. He had had one arm and one leg amputated. And from all his identification, he appears to be your son. When we're not willing to bear with those that need our help, if we're not willing, then we have to rethink what our faith is really like. What about those people that are at the end of the rope? What about those people that have nowhere else to turn? And they turn to us. They turn to the Christians. Most times, folks, as a last resort. They tried everything else. And now they're looking, and what happens when we're not there? They're at their end of the rope. It is Bill Hybels that made the statement, I would never want to reach out someday with a soft, uncalloused hand, a hand never dirtied by serving, and shake the nail-pierced hand of Jesus. We need to bear with those that need our help. No one should carry that burden by themselves. We need to help them. The second thing that Paul shares with us in here is sharing. To share the gospel by sharing our lives, what we have, not just material things, but that we're ready and willing to share whatever we have. Whatever we have. You know, there was a preacher that went out to a farmer. They were pretty good friends. And they were talking there at the farm, and he said to the farmer, he said, Abe, if you had 100 horses, would you give God 50 of them? He said, oh, yes, I would. Absolutely. Certainly. Well, Abe, if you had 100 cows, would you give God 50 of them? And Abe said, oh, absolutely. Whatever I could give to God, I would give to God. He said, well, Abe, if you had 2 pigs, would you give them to God? And he said, now, come on. You know I've got 2 pigs. Ever heard someone tell you, boy, if I won the lotto, I'd give all this money to the church? And my answer is, no, you wouldn't. If you're not giving to God what you have now, you won't then either. And we'll say, well, if we had all this, we'd be able to do this, this, and this. No, we won't. No, we won't. Okay? So we have to give of what we have, not look and say, boy, someday, if all this happens, then we would be able to help and do things for God. We need to be willing to share, period. To share our lives, period. Whatever that we might have, be able to share with those people around us. There was a lady named Karen Johnson, and it was breakfast time. And she had her 2 boys, and they were having pancakes, and the boys were arguing over the pancakes. And Mom says, you know that if Jesus was here, you know what Jesus would do. And Kevin, the littlest, picked up the pancakes and said, Ryan, you be Jesus. We have a tendency as human nature to be selfish, to think that we need all these things that we don't need. Maybe we want, but not necessarily what we need, that we can share. In fact, in Ephesians 4, Apostle Paul will write, everyone work with your hands that you may share with those around you. He didn't say so you can make all this money and live comfortably. He says so that you could share with those that are in need. That is the Christian lifestyle. That is the Christian purpose of what we need to do. To focus on others, especially the Christians. In Galatians 6, verse 10, to do good to all people, what does that say? Especially those of the household of faith. Especially to my brother and sister in Christ. That there should be no question about that. You know, one of my dear friends, Jake Solomon, and one of the things I can tell you about Jake, if you would say something we need, Jake would say, I'll do it. He didn't even know what it is. That was Jake. No matter what, he was right there. He was ready to do whatever needed to be done, to share whatever they needed to share. And that's what we as Christians are to do. Remember the wreck in Missouri. We were there and they were trying to get everything straightened out. The traffic was stopped. And there was a long line of traffic stopped. Well, the next summer, I had a camp team from Central there for camp. And I'll give them credit. I received several calls from the college, making sure that we were okay when we got home and those types of things. But we were at camp the next summer and we were talking about it. And I said something about the accident. And they said, yeah, we saw it. I said, you saw it? Yeah. Where were you at? Well, we were in line of traffic. We were traveling somewhere to another church, and we were in the traffic, and we saw it was you. But we were afraid you got hurt, so we didn't stop. That they didn't want to see us injured, so they didn't stop to help us. Is that kind of us at times? We're not sure what it's going to involve if we stop to help, so we just go on. Just go on. So we have to look at this idea of sharing, with sharing. If I'm not sharing with just whoever needs my help, it has nothing to do with who they are, it has everything to do with who I am. That there are those people that are help. People will say, well, if we help them, will they come to church? I don't think it's a question of whether they'll come to church or not. It's a question of whether we're going to be the church or not. That's what we have to look at. That's what we've got to decide if we're going to reach those people. I don't care what kind of lifestyle they're having. How are you going to tell someone that you're not going to give them food to eat? Tell me. As a Christian, I don't care if you're a Christian or not. If you have food down in the basement of the church, how are you going to look and say, well, no, we're not going to help you because? That's crazy. That's crazy, isn't it? How would you like if somebody came to you and you needed food and you said, no, they said, no, I don't agree with your political status. Therefore, we're not going to help you. Okay? To share with those people of what is needed. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and 25, it says that we're to set an example of encouragement to those people. Not to be encouraged, but to encourage. Especially our Christian brother and sister, to help them however needs to be helped. For you see that Christianity is a lifestyle, it's not a religion. It's a way that I live based upon my faith and my love for Jesus, not a religion. To serve in sincerity. We are seeking the approval of God, that we are treating people the way God would want us to treat, not other people. That I don't have to help someone and then stand up in front of the whole church and tell everybody what I did. I've missed the point then. I probably have missed the blessing then. Just secretly, anonymously. I always think about the gentleman, whoever it is, during Christmas time, that always puts that, what is it, $10,000 he puts in the bucket, that coin for the Salvation Army every year. They don't have any idea who it is. Isn't that great? That if you found out who it was, or he announces who it was, doesn't that destroy the whole thing here? We're just to help. God knows. God knows if we're helping those people we need to. Do we care about people, or do we care about them just enough to get them to church? I put that in there because I saw this church sign. If you saw that, we care Sundays at 10 a.m. only. Now that's not what the sign means. The sign means they have church at 10 a.m. only. But if you read that whole thing, what does it say to you? We care about you only at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Okay? I hope and pray that that's not true of us. One of the things that bothers me, it's not a major thing, but there's a lot of people in town that I know. Okay? After 30 years, I hope there's a lot of people in town that I know. And I will see them in their homes or wherever, and we'll talk back and forth. And out on the street, it's like they don't even know me. Boy, that bothers me. If I'm your friend in your home, then I'm your friend out on the street. And they'll look the other way, and maybe I'm ugly, right, Russ? God can only do with what he's got, right? Okay? But why is that? Do we do that to our brother and sister in Christ? Do we just look the other way? That we are not going to acknowledge that they are my brother and sister? We don't know what's going on in our lives. We need to share with them ourselves. That's what they're looking for. At the nursing homes, we go for Bible study and take communion to people, and I know that communion is important to a lot of people, but I also have an inkling that what is really important to those folks is us spending time with them. Yeah, the communion is neat, it's very important. What I've And I will share this with you, not about me, but when I first was asked to do a Bible study out at Watsika Healthcare on Wednesdays, I really did not want to do that. Okay? I had no problem going to hospitals because people are supposed to be sick. But in nursing homes, you have a different degrees of illness and problems and stuff. But folks, I have met some of the greatest people of my whole life there. And that's one of the things I look forward to. One of the things that really bothered me during the time of Rich's illness, that I wasn't able to have that Bible study. They are more prone. There's about 5 or 6 people that when I go out there, the first question that they ask me is, how's your son? They remember from week to week to week what's going on with Rich. Excuse me. Sermon's about over with, I guess. We are to live a consistent life of sharing with other people. And it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to give what you have, to sacrifice what you might think you need to help those people that are in need. Our goal is to win people to Christ, is it not? Our goal is to live as an example of Christ before people, is it not? And finally, caring. A genuine love and concern for other people. So tell me, do we love those people or do we just put up with them? Is it more of a peaceful coexistence than it is love? I love Pete Brady. Cindy was amazed at that. But do I love Pete as long as he sits on his side of the church and I'll sit on mine? Yeah, right? Tell me, if we are just in peaceful coexistence, if we cannot look at people and say that we truly care about them, what are we doing up here at this table? My Bible says I can't be here. If you come to the temple and you and your brother have something against one another, go settle that first and then come back to this table. Okay? To love, to care about those people around them. And after all these years of preaching, folks, still I am pretty much convinced that people are neat. People are interesting, very interesting. That I've learned so much from so many different people here. But our goal is to encourage them, to comfort them. You know, in a world that is pretty rotten, right? This is to be an oasis here. This is where I can come and feel free. That I can unburden myself, that I can care about those around me. Ephesians chapter 4. Live a life as worthy of your calling. Just to care about other people. Our brothers and sisters in Christ and us have a very special place in God's heart. And they need to have it in our hearts too. Are we willing? What are the 2 images that Paul gives us here of a loving mother and a concerned father? That's how he saw the people at Thessalonica. Are we willing also? Because it's a whole lot harder to pick up the pieces than it is to catch them before they fall. It's a whole lot easier to help someone before everything falls apart than it is to put their lives back together. It is easier to try to help keep the life together than it is to put it back together. Are we willing to inspire people by our example, to be gentle with people with no attitude of superiority? You know why we should not act superior to other people? Because we're not. We're not. We're just like them. We're human. We need God's grace. We've responded to that grace. So can't we help other people see that also? In the parable of the Good Samaritan, in the beginning, the man asked, "Who is my neighbor?" At the end, Jesus asked the question, "Whose neighbor am I?" See the difference? See the difference that is there? To treat people as we want to be treated. To grow in that compassion. That our lives are to be a reflection of what we believe. To live to be a blessing to others. That's not just going to happen. That's going to have to be a decision that I make. And we can be remarkable also if we strive to be so. The question then is this. Is God honored by my presence at Centennial Christian Church? Remember the accident in Missouri. One of the blessings that came out of that, I don't know what else would have happened there. But because of all of the ambulance and fire trucks and police cars that came out, there was a man, his first name was Vaughn, I cannot remember his last name. He was a minister in the area, he was also a chaplain for the fire department. and he was out there, okay? And he came out, and he had this small little car that he was driving in. If I remember right, there were 9 of us in that van when we had the accident. And we were about, I don't know, had to be 10 or 12 miles from Hannibal, Missouri. Now, the hospital in Hannibal is out on the west side of town, but at that time it was downtown Hannibal. So we had no transportation, so Vaughn took us from the accident scene with all our luggage and everything all the way to the hospital. Twice. He couldn't get all of us at one time. So he drove all the way in there, drove all the way back out, picked the rest of us up, took us all the way back. Okay? By the time we got out of the hospital, with all of us getting taken care of, it was midnight. And Vaughn says, "What do you need now?" See, that was his question. What do you need now? Well, these kids are not eating since noon. He's all, I know, a restaurant, a few blocks from here that's open 24 hours a day. I'll take you there. And he did. Twice. He took part of us because there wasn't enough room, and then he took us back. He sat there until we got done eating. And you know what he asked me next? What do you need? Well, we need a place to stay. Okay? So it's Howard Johnson's now. It's called Hannibal House at the time. So we went to Hannibal House. Again, how many trips? 2 trips. And we got there, and we all got there. The clerk looks at it and said, "We're sorry, we don't have any rooms." So we called another motel, and they had rooms. So guess who took us there? 2 trips. Okay? By this time, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So when we get to the second motel, they asked, "Is your name Joe Hughes?" I said, "Yes." "Well, the hospital called." I said, "Okay." So I called the hospital back. There was a form I had failed to sign, and Josh Brown had to have a tetanus shot. So who took us back to the hospital? Vaughn. Okay? And when we got back to the motel, and it was time for us to get settled and everything, I looked. He was nowhere to be found. He didn't, no thank you. We weren't able to at all. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Now, I remember his name because of what he did. That in a time when there was a great need, he was there showing that he cared. I mean, we were at the hospital for a long time. And he was showing that he cared. And he sat there and he waited. You know, there were 9 of us. They wanted to take me in. I almost had my breastbone cracked in the accident. They wanted to take an x-ray, and I wouldn't go there until all the kids were taken care of. One of the things that we have now in our permission slips is you authorize these to give medical care, because we didn't have it then. Remember that, Jenny? All the hospital had to call all the parents, and all the parents called me back. Let me find out what's going on. And I remember when I was the last one in, the doctor came in and he asked my name, and I told him. He said, "Oh, you're Joe Hughes." He said, "I heard your name so many times, I thought you were a new doctor here at the hospital or something." But Vaughn was there to help. I don't know what else we would have done. And he had to go way out of his way to do that. But I have a sneaky suspicion that Vaughn did that simply because he cared. He was a Christian, and he was going to step out and help those people that he could that were in need. Will we? Our hymn of invitation this morning is "Just As I Am." And the question that we have here is that, will I offer myself to God in a different way, in a new way? Will I be willing to bear with those around me that need my help? Am I ready to share with what God has given me, both material and emotional? And will I care far beyond just reaching the goal that I want them to believe in Jesus? Will I truly care, not because of who they are, but because of who I am and who I believe in? Let's stand together. It's 387 in the hymnal, the first and second verses.